Ajabutuyara, I know that we've talked about porous borders, we've talked about unmanned borders, which again in recent times the Nigerian Immigration Service is installing eBorders, which is supposed to give an insight into what happens at the border, even if they are not manned. That from the command and control center here in Abuja, you can see what happens along the borders. And so that leads me to asking, how much of this challenge is corruption? Corruption on the part of those who ought to ensure that the borders are tightened, or who ought to ensure that things are not smuggled in through the borders, and how much of failure of intelligence is it?
Excuse me. Thank you very much. While I do not see the perspective differently, it is my submission that apart from the point you've made, the fundamental gap in these enforcement and procedural errors, which you pointed out, I think the fundamental still goes back to the defective and obsolete legislation with respect to arms control as we have in our country. And I want to use this forum to remind our National Assembly to review and revisit the Firearms Act in Nigeria. Considering the exigencies of the moment and the absolute danger we face as a result of issues relating to illicit arms, it is my submission that a consideration of effecting legislative change to make bearing arms by non-state actors, particularly lethal weapons, to be an aggravated felony with all the conditions that make it impossible for them to get out of adjudication and consideration. If the legislation is not effected, most of the efforts we tend to put in place for now will not yield the desired impact. The criminal elements who do arms trading, arms purchasing, and arms use, they are aware of this legislative defect. However, if a consideration is given whereby persons in possession of lethal weapons like AK-47 or of higher grade on conviction to amount to death penalty or something similar, or life imprisonment, with little or no option, fine, and things like that, certainly the trade will have a drastic reduction. In addition to the corruption you talk about, certainly arms business all over the world is deeply immersed in corruption, both in the developed world and in the developing world, to the extent that arms manufacturers in some countries even influence the emergence of government of the day. They contribute to political engineering in order to have favorable policy that tends to protect their illicit trade. We are aware. Besides the corruption we talk about, what are we really doing to ourselves in our country that tends to make the use of weapons an attractive enterprise? We need to do soul searching as a country. Why is it that persons who goes about with weapons do not get the severest sanction by our legislation or by our state apparatus? That itself is an institutional or national concern that we need to redress. Once it's done in that way, the issue of corruption influence with respect to the arms enterprise will become easier to manage. In addition to the aforesaid, it is important for us to take further deeper review of what we call armory in our country. In our services, we need to do a holistic, or we as a government or as a people need to do a holistic review of creating enabling environment for arms storage. Most of the places you call armory or our public armories, when you go there, most things you see there do not fall within the international best practices of arms storage, arms accountability, etc. We need to invest in building standard armories, meaning standard public armory. That is to say, for where we keep weapons belonging to state actors. Most often, we keep armories in places that is akin to grain storage facilities. When you add it up, you discover that situations exist that makes improper access to this facility or unlawful access to these facilities to become very, very, very possible or very, very easy. So building armories in standard form within the best industry practice as we know it is still apt. That is why the point I'm making is that we as a country, we need to do deeper introspection in terms of how we are managing these affairs, because these affairs of arms and ammunition are very central to our individual safety and collective safety. In addition, apart from the corruption with respect to what we have said, the people we put at the boundaries or at our borders to do border guard work for us, have we really, as countrymen, taken a deeper look at the operating environment, considering how we provided for them to be there? Has it a commensurate relationship with this our expected excellent performance in checking inflow of arms? We must be honest to ourselves as fellow compatriots to do the needful.